There are connections that don't ask for a future. They arrive, they awaken, and then they disappear, yet their echo never leaves. Why does someone who stayed so little remain so much? There's a type of love that doesn't demand definition. It simply stirs something sacred and eternal within us, not because of who they are, but because of what they awaken. Carl Jung taught that we often fall not for a person, but for our own soul's reflection in them. The anima, the animus, those inner figures of longing we carry projected onto someone who, just by being, reveals what we've silenced inside. And Neville Goddard reminds us, imagination is reality, which means the one you ache for might never have been the one, but a living invitation to meet the version of yourself that was always waiting. So no, this isn't a story of loss. It's a story of becoming. Because the soul rarely sends us companions for comfort. It sends us initiators, those who stir the ground beneath our feet so that we may finally listen to the part of us that's been calling from within. There is a pain that disguises itself as love. It knocks on the heart like a recent visitor, but in truth, it has lived there much longer than the person who awakened it. Sometimes, what you feel is not desire. It is memory, not of moments shared, but of ancient wounds reopened. You thought it was him, his voice, his presence, his absence, but he was never the source. He was the spark. The soul wound was already there, hidden beneath years of silence, waiting to be touched, the need to be seen, the hunger to be chosen, the dream of being saved from yourself. These were not born with him. They awoke because of him. That is the mystery of the psyche. What you long for is not always the person, but the healing you thought his love could bring. It's not about getting him back. It's about retrieving the part of you that still believes you were abandoned, even when the abandonment was much older than this love. There is a moment, quiet and sharp, when the soul begins to doubt its own clarity. If it felt so intense, why did it end? If it seemed written in the stars, why did the story never begin? The heart, so certain it had found home, finds itself wandering again, questioning whether what it lived was destiny or delusion. Modern spirituality often says, if it's strong, it's meant to be, but the soul speaks in symbols, not in outcomes, and symbols are not always meant to stay. Sometimes they're meant to shake the earth beneath our feet. Carl Jung saw this, the way we project our inner beloved onto others. The anima, the animus, these sacred images rise from the unconscious and wear someone else's face. And just as they appear, they vanish, not because they were a mistake, but because their mission was to awaken, not to remain. Neville Goddard reminds us, the one you long for may not be your future, but a mirror of the state your soul is being called into, a glimpse of what you are capable of feeling, a reflection of a version of yourself that you're just beginning to remember. So no, maybe he wasn't meant to be yours, but he was meant to reveal what still sleeps in you. And maybe that's even more sacred. There are people who don't come to complete us. They come to fracture the silence we've made peace with, to awaken a longing so deep that we mistake it for love, when in truth, it is a calling. When he appeared, something shifted. A light turned on in a room you had forgotten existed. You felt alive, not because of him, but because of what he stirred in your inner world. But what if he wasn't the message? What if he was just the messenger, and the real message was the part of you that trembled in his presence, the part that felt seen, beautiful, awake? Ask yourself, why did you feel so alive when he was near? What part of you returned when he looked at you? What did he mirror that you had abandoned? Often, it's not the person we long for. It's the self that came to the surface when they were near. That woman who felt vibrant, worthy, radiant. She wasn't created by him. She was remembered through him. And now, even in his absence, her memory insists on staying, because she is yours. When we confuse awakening with possession, we begin to chase what was never meant to be held. The nervous system, unable to differentiate the symbolic from the literal, turns a sacred spark into a cycle of longing. And what could have been a door becomes a labyrinth. The heart circles the same memories. Dreams repeat the same scenes. You feel haunted, not by him, but by the part of you that doesn't understand why it still hurts. This is the pain of misreading a spiritual visitation. Instead of integrating the light he ignited, you chase the shadow he left behind. The soul offered a moment, an initiation, but the mind clung to the person, and in doing so, it created a loop. Obsession instead of revelation, exhaustion instead of expansion. The one who stirred your waters was not the harbor. They were the storm that revealed your own uncharted depths. Longing, when misunderstood, becomes a prison. But when understood, it becomes a path. There are souls who arrive like distant lights on the horizon, not to accompany your journey, but to remind you that you still have one. Imagine this: a ship lost at sea, surrounded by fog, unsure of its course. And then, in the distance, a lighthouse keeper lights the flame. He doesn't come aboard. He doesn't promise destination. He simply reveals direction. That's what he was. Not a companion for your path, but the flame that reminded you you are still sailing. You still have a soul capable of desire, a heart still able to recognize beauty in the dark. His light wasn't a homecoming. It was a disruption, an interruption to the sleep you had surrendered to. And because he wasn't meant to stay, his absence now glows with even more power. Because in losing him, you began to remember yourself. He was never meant to walk your shore. He was only meant to illuminate it so that you could find your own steps again. She was in her 50s when he appeared, not in youth, not in naivety, but at a stage where silence had become a kind of safety. And yet he entered her life like fire enters a cold room, not with promises, not with permanence, but with the unbearable gift of making her feel again. For 6 months, she felt seen, not admired, seen. As if all the years she had folded inside herself were suddenly unfolding in his presence. Then, as quietly as he arrived, he left. She tried to name it: unfinished love, an open chapter. A cruel coincidence, but time, like water, began to soften the sharpness, and eventually she saw it. He was never her ending, he was her ignition. What he gave her was not himself, but the memory of how deeply she could still feel. The ache she thought was about him was actually about the self she had buried to survive. In the end, the longing didn't lead her back to him. It led her back to the part of her that still burned. Did you enjoy the content and it made a difference for you? Click on Super Thanks and support our work. There are encounters that don't make logical sense, but change everything. They enter not through reason, but through energy. And once they touch you, you are never quite the same. Jung called them archetypal visitations, figures that rise from the collective unconscious to mark the threshold of a new inner identity. The man you loved may have carried more than just a name. He may have carried an archetype, the initiator, the mirror, the sacred disruptor. He didn't come to offer a future. He came to shake the foundation of the past. And when he left, his presence didn't go with him, because the symbolic doesn't exit through the same door it enters. It stays, it echoes, it works from within. The task now is not to find him again, but to recognize what was stirred and to complete the inner rite he unknowingly began. This is the hidden labor of the soul, to turn heartbreak into initiation, to turn absence into metamorphosis. Because those who arrive as symbols never truly leave, they transform. At night, when silence returns and the world no longer asks for your attention, there is a space, quiet, sacred, where the soul still listens. In this space, the longing that once felt unbearable can become language. Not the kind spoken aloud, but the kind that rises like a whisper from the depths of being. Light a single candle, not as a spiritual act, but as a symbol. of the flame he awakened in you, and then speak, not to him, but to the part of you that emerged when he entered. Ask it, what do you want from me now? What did you come to awaken? What do you still carry in silence? Then write, not a letter to him, but a letter to the version of you who was born through his presence. This is not a closure, it's a continuation of your own becoming. Longing was never meant to be silenced. It was meant to be translated, and when it is, it stops aching and starts guiding. Some souls do not arrive to accompany you. They arrive to awaken what you had silenced. And though they leave you with more than absence. They leave you with yourself, more alive, more fractured, more whole. Carl Jung taught that no loss is final when it becomes conscious. Every departure, when met with awareness, becomes a thread in the tapestry of integration. Neville Goddard whispered that we do not meet people by chance, but by resonance. Each one carries a reflection of the dream we are learning to embody, so do not ask why he left. Ask what in you he came to awaken, because maybe he was never the destination. He was the signal, the mirror, the light in the fog. And now his absence is not emptiness, but direction, because the one who awoke your longing was not meant to stay. He was meant to remind you that your soul still knows the way home. If you made it this far, comment, Estoy despierta,